another episode of the Unspecial podcast. We are a space for parents to come be heard, supported, equipped, and inspired. We're not here to tell you what to do with your child or present the latest therapies and behavior modifications. We are simply here for you. Our hope, our goal is for all parents to be in community with one another and in community with us at Unspecial. So thank you for joining us. So today we want to talk about a couple terms thrown around the special ed community. The biggest one that everybody hears is IEP, Individual Education Plan. On this plan, it's a series of papers and documents and data that the teacher writes up for every student, ultimately to set them up for success. In this IEP, you go over the strengths of the student, the weaknesses, which I never like to say weaknesses, areas of growth, because when you get into a meeting, that's hard for anybody to hear. So you go over the areas of growth, any accommodations they need in class, modifications to the curriculum, and ultimately you're presenting a document to the student and to the parent on how to make them successful at school. Now, this is a legal document and you're bound by it to follow it. On the document, you have a series of goals. And now this is kind of like the grading schedule, the grading parameters for these students. And in these goals, you have the goal in each category of academics, math, history, science, PE, social, behavioral for the mod severe classes. I never really got into the academic side of things too much because I was a mod severe teacher. And so we would hit more on behavior and just functioning as a whole in society. So in these goals, let's say you have a goal for behavior. Timmy will sit in his chair for 10 minutes and be engaged in a lesson. There's benchmarks every 3 months for him to hit that goal. And throughout the whole year, you're taking tons of data. Now, these data sheets are where you track how they're doing on their goals, because what you track grows. But what the sheets don't tell you is what else is going on in the student's life. It's just a paper that has check marks that say he's meeting or he's not meeting his goal. So when you get into the IEP, you present all of this. And then you propose new goals that supposedly are supposed to be worked on with the parent and the student, not just the teacher. These meetings can be intense, they can be fun, they can be long. Everyone's in the room, behavior therapists, psychologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, general education teacher, administrators, advocates. Advocate is a person that the parent hires to advocate for their child's rights. And so they're kind of like the mediator. They present everything they know on the legal side to make sure the school is providing everything the child needs to succeed. And so you sit through these meetings, they're an hour and a half long. The teacher has to schedule these on everybody else's schedule, which is a complete nightmare. So you get like 8 service providers on a calendar, and then you have to find a space in there that everybody can meet because everybody has to sign off on it. And so everyone brings their 2 cents and you go over everything in the meeting. And many times parents don't have any space to talk, or the student doesn't have any space to talk. But it's important to realize that when a student is in the meeting, you are talking about the student. It's best to talk with the student, not at the student. And so you let them advocate for what they want and need. And then this is your document you go by for the rest of the year. And if there's any tweaks or anything needs to change on it, then you have another meeting. And a lot of times this is the burnout for special ed teachers because the paperwork can be overwhelming. There's a lot of data, a lot of tracking, and this is the number one reason why special ed teachers burn out, because the focus goes from off of the student to all the administrative side of special ed. Common practice that I came across is a lot of the goals written for these students are pre-filled out. So there's a bank of goals that you can pull and apply it to the child. I never did this because this gets rid of the individualized aspect of the student. So then you're just plugging goals for the student that many times don't necessarily apply to the student. So it's important to always write specific goals for specific needs of the student. And another big thing on these IEPs is the accommodations and modifications. And this plays a large role into inclusion when you include the special ed student into the general education class. And this is law, which some general ed population don't necessarily invite special education into that world because it's uncomfortable for them. But for example, if a student needs to sit on an exercise ball because he needs proprioceptive input, that would be a modification to his curriculum. So when he goes into the special or general education class, he would be provided an exercise ball to sit on instead of a chair, and that would help him stay engaged throughout the lesson. Accommodations would be an example of speech to text. So instead of the student reading the test questions, the test would be voiced to the student so they can hear and read at the same time. Just these little small nuances that set up every student for success. They're bound by law to follow all of these accommodations and modifications. And it's the job of the special education teacher to remind the general education teacher of these certain needs that the student has. That's what's discussed. A reasonable accommodation would be discussed in the IEP meeting between the student and the parent. And this is kind of where the whole team comes together and explains exactly what the student would need in that class to make them successful. Inclusion is a legal term. The IDEA, Individuals Disability Education Act, is mandated by law to provide every special education student a free and appropriate public education, FAPE. And in that is LRE, the least restrictive environment. So the most restrictive environment will be a self-contained special education class. And this was my jam. This is my people. It seemed like the more violent they were and the more nonverbal they were is when I really started to shine, and I loved it because every day was a new day. Every day there was something different going on, and it was just constant thinking, adapting, modifying, and making sure everything clicked so that the student had the best opportunities to succeed. So I would encourage every parent, when you step into an IEP meeting, to reach out to other parents before the meeting and see how they go about the meeting. And the biggest thing is you're the biggest advocate in the room. You know your child better than anybody else in the room. We all have our training and book knowledge, but you know the ins and outs of your child. I would encourage all of you to make sure to voice what you know and what you feel. And if you hear something that doesn't really sit right and the team is suggesting a certain modification or accommodation or a certain goal that just doesn't really make sense to you, I would encourage you to say something. The easiest meetings that I sat through is when the parent didn't say anything, but that's not necessarily what's best for the student. So the more effective way to go about these is for you, the parent, to speak into the meeting. And really, if your child is able to articulate what they want and need, bring that into the meeting as well. There's another common term in special education, picture exchange communication. Now, this is essentially just visuals. Every self-contained classroom needs to have visuals for everything, for the bathroom, for the door, for snacks. And it's a system for students to keep their schedule. So at every desk, I would put the entire day of what the schedule is for the day, such as morning routine, morning circle time, walk, bathroom break, a free time break, followed by a science lesson, and then math, lunch time, movie time, whatever it is in the schedule, every student's desk would have a picture icon representing the entire day. And when it was time for that part of the day, they would take the picture and they would walk it across the class to wherever that activity took place. So if we were going out to lunch, there would be an icon next to the door that had lunch with Velcro. They would grab their lunch icon, and as they were walking out the door, they would place it on the Velcro underneath the big picture that said lunch. And this is by far the most important thing I ever did in these classes. But the trick is you have to stay true to the schedule, because when you start mixing it up, if the students would come into the class and they would see this, they would go straight to their desk and look at the schedule for the day. But if you miss something, that will really spin them out, because nobody likes surprise. So the element of surprise is the nemesis in this system. But then also to teach flexibility and adaptability, sometimes I would put an icon in there that had nothing on it. And they would learn to be able to roll with the change that's going on in the class. This didn't always go well. Not so much. There was many times where chairs would fly across the room, and they didn't like that. But our job as the teacher is to set them up to be vital citizens in the community. And so you can't always predict what's going to happen next. So these were some basic skills that we were trying to teach. I primarily taught life skills classes. So my focus on curriculum was just around your basic needs: hygiene, laundry, cooking, and so forth. Because my goal was always for the students to be able to go home and just simulate with the rest of their peers and siblings to give the parents the most beneficial time at home. Another common term in special education is ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. And this is a huge word in the autism world. Essentially, each student is working towards a certain reward. And so they would have little token books that would have 5 spaces for a star. And with good behavior, they would earn a star. And then when they got their 5 stars, they would earn whatever reward that they picked. And these rewards were on a separate sheet of paper that had everything that they liked to do: play basketball, go on a walk, have a snack, whatever it is. And so throughout a lesson, say the lesson was 15 minutes long, the staff would be giving them stars, rewarding good behavior. Big controversy is taking the stars away, which I never encourage, because that's not really how it works. If they don't earn the star, they just don't get the star. And then by the time, say 15 minutes ends, they did everything they were supposed to do in the lesson, they would get their reward. And this was an intrinsic motivational way for the student to succeed throughout the day. And in the autism world, this is going on the entire day. However, a big mistake with this analysis is taking your eyes off of the student. So then you start treating them like a project, and you're not really even in tune with what they're doing. You're only trying to correct behavior. But the alternative would be to get curious with the behavior, why they're doing the behavior. ABC, antecedent behavior consequence, is another thing, a behavior strategy that's employed many times in the classroom. But with this method of thinking, you're trying to correct behavior with consequence, where the more holistic approach to it, which is what I love to do, which is where I coined the hashtag street sped, is focus on the student, and you'll learn how to work with their intricacies and let them really be a person. And so through that, I was able to really shape and mold behaviors to a way that was acceptable. And this was my biggest successes, was around behavior, because I treated every kid normal. I would talk to them normal. I would say, "Hey man, what's up? How you doing?" what's going on today, even though many times I never got a response. They know what I'm saying. They hear me. They never looked at me. It didn't really matter. They could feel your vibe. I read a book once and it described the mindset of kids with autism as they see people with color. They see people in color. So if you were a red color, you were a threat to that student. And many times they would act out with the behavior. If you were a green or a blue color, they liked your vibe. They felt good about you. They wanted to be around you. Yellow was like, you're the best person. And so I truly believe that, because there was many times staff would come in and I got bad vibes from them, and that's just magnified with the student, and many times they would get punched. It's just the fact of the matter. So whenever you're around these students, just treat them normal. Just be their friend. See what they like. Do what they like. Don't try and change them. Just be with them. So what I would tell every parent in an IEP, in the special needs community, is you're qualified for the job. You may not think it. You may not realize it. You're climbing an uphill battle that you may think you never deserved, but is happening for you, not to you. You have what it takes to live this life with the special needs student. And the biggest thing you can do is get in community with one another. We can't go about this alone. We need story. We need inspiration. And the most powerful component to anything is hope. So live into that future that you see yourself in. Don't bring your past into your future. Live into the hope. Hold on to the hope and do it around the community. Thanks for watching another episode of the Unspecial podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. You can find us at Unspecial LLC on Instagram, unspecialllc.com, and we would love to hear your feedback and have you on the show. Thanks again.